All right, so I'm going to start sharing my screen. Can folks see my screen?
Yes, looks good.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
So today, welcome everyone. This is the third meeting of the Just Transition Employment and Retraining Working Group of the Climate Change Commission. This was a working group that was created by the Climate Solutions Now Act of 2022. And I am Cindy Osordo. I'm really excited to be joining you today as the chair of the working group. And I'm really excited to be giving you some updates and some survey kind of summary results. And I will be kind of inviting some discussion towards the end. So the outline today is that we will be going over some updates regarding this particular working group. We do have a new member. Then we'll go into some general Climate Change Commission updates. We will just highlight some of the work that is going on in some of the other working groups that is very important and is interconnected with what we're doing here. We'll do an overview of the survey results, and then we will invite our member from the Maryland Department of Labor to talk about their offshore wind workforce development efforts. We will then have discussion, and finally, we will end with public comments. And in case you're wondering what the picture here is, it's a MTA picture of a light rail, because one of the things that we envision in our climate plan is actually having more clean transportation and more public transportation sustainable options in the States. So moving. Oh, I'm sorry. Stephanie?
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm going to do the roll call for the record. If you are here on behalf of the member, also please let us know. So I'll be just going down the list. Senator Don Guile, Senator John Moutz, Delegate Regina Boyce, Delegate, oh, hi, Regina. Delegate David Frazier Hidalgo, Cindy Osorto,
Here.
Chanel Viator,
Here.
Allison Breitnother,
Present.
Richard Strong, Jason Asher, Rico Albuquerques, Donna S. Edwards,
Sorry, I'm here. I'm not sure if that was recorded.
oh yeah, okay, we've got you down, thanks. Gerald Jackson, Jerry Williford Jr., Sean Streiser, Casey Ross,
Here.
Ryan Trolley,
Here.
Khalid Malik,
I'm here.
Stephanie Johnson, Laura Cyphers, Aaron Appel, Brad Phillips, Lynn Nash, Kimberly Haven, Jennifer Walsh, Suzanne Mikowski, Kobe Little, Tiffany Fisher, Larry Shiflett, John Hines,
Here.
and Tanya Terrell.
Here.
Thanks.
Lauren Peters is here too, from Next Generation.
Are you here on behalf of a member?
Michelle Joseph.
Mr. Peters, Michelle Joseph is not a member. If you are a non-member, you are welcome to introduce yourself with your name and organization in the chat. We were just doing roll call of the members right now.
Absolutely. Okay.
Great. So that concludes the member piece. One exciting update for today is that we do have a new member. One of the seats is environmental organization selected by the governor, and we got notification just a week ago that someone was selected for that seat, and it is Mr. Khalid Malik. He is a LEED accredited professional. He is very involved in some of our building decarbonization kind of work in Maryland. And I don't think I can do justice to the great background that we included here. He has over 14 years of experience. He has worked with state, federal, grant applications, bringing communities together, bringing individuals together, supporting a lot of the really good work that we are doing here in Maryland. Khalid, could you please talk a little bit more about yourself and introduce yourself for the group?
Sure. Thank you, Cindy. Like she stated, I've been in the energy and environment space for over 15 years now, and doing a lot of work throughout the Maryland area. Been focused on Montgomery County, Prince George's County. Cindy and I were part of the Building Implementation Task Force, so I was excited that she considered us for this particular position. And we're in grant season, so we're trying to do a lot of capital stacking and get a lot of these community impact projects off the ground. And so I'm just excited to work with you all and make my contributions and advance the state's agenda.
So excited to be working with you, Khalid. Thank you. So the next piece on the agenda is I did want to give a few updates regarding the Climate Change Commission itself. We have been just doing a lot of different things here at MDE, and that does include the commission. One of the main things is we created a new playlist for just this working group, so you can go check that out. All of these presentations will be available following this meeting. And one particular piece that was recently discussed at a different meeting, a working group under the commission, the mitigation working group, is the idea that we need to fund our climate plan. You might recall that we are working off the Climate Solutions Now Act. Our agency put out a December plan that did not include final decisions on where the funding would come from. So this working group is currently evaluating that big question. You can Google, you can check out our website, you can look at our materials about what kinds of policies are being considered. The other piece that I think is very exciting is that there are two other groups that are working on energy related issues, and they also met recently to discuss grid modernization and just some study scoping questions. So as we move along, we will likely be kind of getting updates from what the other groups are doing, and there might be synergy. We might bring them in, or there's just going to be there could be some overlap as we move along. But really the main kind of thing that I wanted to put in front of this group is that we will have to develop recommendations for the consideration of the Climate Change Commission, and we will be voting on August 30th on recommendations to submit to the Climate Change Commission. It would be submitted to the steering committee by early September, and it would be voted on during that upcoming meeting in September 25th. There might be changes on commission meetings. There might be another October meeting if there's the need to hold an additional vote, for example. So just be on the lookout for our website, commission meeting dates, and it'll be very important to keep an eye on as we move forward. Does anyone have any questions? Allison?
Yeah, can you speak a little bit about how this working group's going to handle the drafting of the recommendations and when we will receive them? Like, I'm guessing that we're not going to just see them for the first time on the 30th when we have to vote. So if you could speak to that process a little bit, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Allison, I really appreciate that question because I know that you come from the adaptation working group, and I know you guys are good about kind of providing deadlines and kind of a good process there. So I am going to be sharing the specific process following this meeting. For today, we're just beginning the conversation on kind of some potential collective principles, understandings following the survey. We will be distributing the steps would be just that we will be asking for recommendations. We'll be, as staff, putting that together in a document, and we'll be sending it out to everyone here with ample time to review, to consider. And then during that August 30th meeting, we would be voting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So next in our agenda is the results of our first survey. The purpose of the survey was to gather the feedback of every member here, as well as members of the public, to contribute ideas on opportunities and best practices, as well as challenges, any examples, any opportunities, and then finally, just kind of gathering some ideas that we could continue discussing as we move along. So today, I will just be kind of highlighting the survey results. It is not to mean that it is my view or MDE's view or the commission's view. It is just a collective summary of an initial survey for this working group to kind of start getting some understanding of where we're all coming from. So first off is opportunities and best practices. We received, if you look at our membership, you are aware that we have very diverse stakeholders, very passionate stakeholders within this working group. And these are this is what we received. And I will be, at the end of each kind of summary, I'll be inviting anyone who submitted any of these comments to speak a little bit more about why they submitted that comment. So the first one was comprehensive training program structures. It was building certifications, hands-on learning, retraining, wraparound services, soft skill development for training programs, mentorships, and apprenticeships. We did hear last meeting from Civic Works and some of the programs that they do in that space. So that provides us with some potential examples. We did receive some other examples like Green and Healthy Homes that is another nonprofit organization pursuing some of this work. We also received that another opportunity is providing wraparound services to training program participants. That means those that might need help with case management, legal support, financial stipends, meals, transportation support, and essential tools. can get those services as part of their program, and that can help them be more comfortable during their participation and lead to their long-term success. We also heard that we should be actively training and hiring from overburdened and underserved communities. That means previously incarcerated individuals or people with disabilities and immigrants. We also heard that our Climate Solutions Now Act includes building energy performance standards, and that could mean that we will have massive opportunity in building decarbonization jobs. So one specific opportunity is the benchmarking of buildings for the purposes of meeting that regulation. Could be a great opportunity for STEM and undergraduate students to get involved in building sciences, which will be critical for us to meet our climate goals. And then finally, we heard that braiding funding from multiple streams that could include federal, state, local, utility programs can support comprehensive energy programs and workforce development. Would anyone like to talk about any of the ideas here that they submitted?
Cindy, this is Elisa Bassnight. And I think this is an excellent list of opportunities and best practices. My passion, I think, is, as you know, and for the folks here on the call, is really to ensure that we are finding ways to incorporate new areas of individuals for workforce development, because the data shows us, as we recognize, to get to these 2033 energy standards, we need to basically almost 2x our population with 64,000 new jobs. And if we don't start investing in the young talent and the future talent, we are definitely going to be in a world of hurt. So I'm really pleased to see the incorporation of looking at the future talent. Thank you.
Yeah, I just like to say, I mean, we're in a compliance-driven state, so I mean, there's going to be a tremendous amount of opportunities at all levels. Maryland's kind of leading this effort. You don't have any other state that has the standards or the BEPS, the building performance standards that they're pursuing. So I definitely see ground level opportunity with benchmarking. I think I might have stated that before. Not just the buildings over 35,000 square feet. I think the buildings under 35,000, there's a tremendous amount of property, but really it's funding. I mean, we have to figure out a way how to generate capital, to make these improvements, to be able to deliver the actual scopes of work, and get the students, young adults, formerly incarcerated individuals involved. But that's my position. But other than that, this is a great list, Cindy, and I think you're heading in the right direction.
Thank you so much. Does anyone else have any comments from those that submitted survey responses or anything else? Alrighty, so moving on. So that was a fun piece. That was the best practices and opportunities. Next, we did ask about challenges. So there are challenges. We heard that identifying the right certifications can be a challenge. We heard that lack of transportation or technology access for trainees can be a challenge. We heard that having transferable training regarding having a certification or a training program be transferable to future jobs or other jobs is a challenge for some folks. Then we heard the cost of programs to attract and retain talent can be difficult, especially if you're looking for quality or diverse talent. We heard PPPs can be one option, and that can support union labor and contractors along with building trade unions. We heard that fair wages can be a challenge, or having affordable products or access or representation of people of different backgrounds, including women and different people of color. We heard that there is uncertainty about the future regarding well-paying green jobs with benefits for those that work in the fossil fuel industry. We heard that we need to include our overburdened and underserved communities. And then finally, we heard that there are barriers to employment for justice system impacted individuals. And that can include legal, education, hiring, transportation, and financial challenges. Any comments here? For the record, I am noting that we just had another member join in, Jennifer Walsh. Thank you for joining us. And everyone, if you're invited to turn on your video if you would like. But it looks like no one has any comments, so we'll keep going.
Well, Cindy, I had a comment. I'm sorry. I was buying my time. So what type of resources have we done, like an inventory of like programs? I know they were establishing these resiliency authorities in certain jurisdictions. Do we have any numbers in terms of what state budget or allocation has, or are there, programs? I know the Department of Labor has a number of resources, and each individual jurisdiction has their own programs. Has there been any type of study in terms of budgets that are available to assist in the transition, indirectly or directly?
The best resource I know regarding anyone interested in any incentive is Desire. I will put that in the chat because it's an excellent, excellent resource. In terms of specific Maryland programs, we actually will be hearing more about that today regarding future workforce development programs in the clean energy space, specifically in the offshore wind space. So stay tuned for specific examples on that later in the call. But Desire, the link is in the chat. It's a national tool.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Desire. I was just thinking like, something that's more specific to the state, and what allocations have been made at like the legislative level. But a lot of this is, again, I'm in the building space, so I'm kind of biased towards commercial building stock. So, a lot of time, the challenges are, the requirements when you're doing these upgrades, and, building owners, being able to, make their, kind of determine who they want to bring into these projects, right? And so I would say we consider some sort of like a local content criteria that requires some of these projects that they, based on, what the goals are. Is it compliance? Is it sustainability? That if state resources are flowing into these projects, that they have some sort of minimum criteria to bring these disadvantaged individuals in. So I think that's one way to overcome some of these challenges. But I mean, I've got more insight on that. And, as I see you got everything outlined here, I'll try to chime in as I can.
Wonderful. Today, it's just a discussion. Really, what will matter is when we ask for recommendations, written recommendations. That is the piece that I will be asking every member here to think carefully about, submitting specific ideas for everyone here to consider and vote on. So Khalid, that could be one thing that you could bring to this group in a month or two. So stay tuned for more instructions on that piece. Thank you. Daniel?
Hi, thanks. Dan Krieger here from the Association of Climate Change Officers. For what it's worth, when we were running the Maryland Climate Leadership Academy, one of the things that we had to do was an assessment of education and training capacity across the state's universities and community college system. So we had a good opportunity to really get an understanding of what was happening at the community college level, and we actually ran some of the academy trainings at the community colleges. There, the community colleges are a great fit, particularly for clean energy labor-oriented jobs for training. And there's actually the way they can be compensated to do it is through federal funding resources. So if it's done the right way, some of those things already exist, but there's some structured design and planning and kind of examining, and that needs to like a real plan and a network of community colleges here could be a really compelling approach to doing this combination of state and federal funding. So just kind of teeing that up for your consideration. That's specifically for the kinds of jobs, working on wind turbines, solar installations, building facilities, stuff like that. They would be a great fit for.
Absolutely. We actually do have a member in this working group that represents community colleges. I don't believe he is here, however. He is not here. His name is Brad. All right. Thank you so much, Daniel. That is definitely one of the things that we received was working with community colleges and aligning well with them as well. I'm going to keep moving in the interest of time. I have just a few more slides. We next heard about we asked about specific shovel-ready and potential projects. So we heard that a lot of people supported the work that Civic Works does, decarbonization programs like Green and Healthy Homes, and that they're interested in expanding that to serve more low to moderate income customers. And that could include things like expanding stove electrification pilots. And to Daniel's point that we just heard, increased funding to community college trade programs. We heard whole home approach for projects, foundational health and safety to be considered alongside electrification and energy efficiency. We heard that we should prioritize hiring and training from historically disadvantaged communities. We heard that we support existing apprenticeships, special training, high school students getting access to that training as well, contractors, and then just providing wraparound service support and having equitable access to provided to EJ communities and the prison system. Would anyone like to add a little bit more color to their feedback here? All right, I'll keep moving along. So that was the last question was regarding our guiding principles. You might recall that last meeting we presented these guiding principles. These were gathered from a wide variety of different resources, what other states are doing, how the federal government is approaching this, how jurisdictions are approaching just transition. And these are the guiding principles that that I'm hoping we can keep in mind as we move along. So it is quality, clean job creation, occupational training and education, promoting investment in clean jobs and impacted communities, identifying and eliminating structural barriers to employment, hiring and retaining underrepresented workers, collaborating with stakeholders, and emphasizing those workers. You might notice solar and wind here, and that the workers are right in front there. And battery storage there could also be more in our future. So we received the following feedback. Overall, people were supportive and positive of these principles. The additional feedback that was brought forth by everyone is included here, and I'll just mention it. It includes emphasizing union laborers and contractors for retrofitting. It includes training programs, private investments, having specific criteria and standards and procurement opportunities in order to support minorities and women enterprise contractors, to be mindful of obstacles that could be a result of childcare or people with disabilities or transportation. And then finally, just making sure that capacity building funds target underrepresented workers. Does anyone have any feedback on this piece? Wonderful. All right, great. So I will stop the presentation here. And I am going to invite one of our members to start her camera, Ms. Chanel Viator.
Can I go ahead and start sharing, or?
Yes, please go ahead. So now we're moving on to the next portion of the agenda. We just went over the survey results, and we're going to be moving forward with the presentation from Ms. Chanel on some really exciting, forward-looking clean jobs.
Thank you, Cindy. Hi, everyone. My name is Chanel Viator. I am a Special Grants Program Manager at the Maryland Department of Labor within our Division of Workforce Development and Adult Learning. Prior to labor, I have many years of experience with grant management within higher education. So that is where my background is from. My role at labor is to manage our Maryland Works for Wind initiative, which is a federally funded program to support the offshore wind workforce. I am condensing a lot of information today in 30 minutes. So there is some things that I'm going to kind of breeze over and not get into too much detail to, but please feel free to ask any questions in the chat or even unmute yourself during the presentation. So to give you an overview of what the presentation will focus on today, for the purposes of this Just Transition Working Group, I will be talking about the offshore wind industry and focusing on job creation in clean energy. So offshore wind is a clean and renewable energy source that will create thousands of jobs and bolster economic growth. I'll briefly touch on the mission of the Maryland Department of Labor, why offshore wind is relevant in the state of Maryland, a short background on the federally funded program that labor applied for and did receive funding for, and how we use that funding to create the Maryland Works for Wind initiative. So I wanted to start with just showing the mission and vision of the Maryland Department of Labor. So the mission is to connect Marylanders to good jobs, protect workers, consumers, and the public, support Maryland businesses, and foster economic growth and competitiveness. So just keep this in mind as we go through the presentation today of where our department plays a role within the state. So here is a very high-level overview of the offshore wind projects in Maryland with a timeline. This is extremely simplified. It doesn't include, past legislation that got us to where we are today. The purposes of this timeline is just to show you where we are in terms of building the offshore wind projects in Maryland. So back in 2017, the Maryland Public Service Commission awarded offshore wind renewable energy certificates, ORECs, to 2 offshore wind developers called US Wind and Ørsted. Then in 2021, PSC awarded ORECs again for 2 more offshore wind projects to the same exact developers, US Wind and Ørsted, that essentially extended their previous 2 projects. It's important to note that the Public Service Commission did approve these projects with the intention that they had to create over 10,000 direct jobs for the industry. Fast forward to this year, in the beginning of 2024, Ørsted did announce that it was withdrawing from agreements with Maryland to develop their offshore wind projects. Due to this action, we were able to pass a bill, HB 1296, that Governor Moore signed into law. The bill required a lot of different things, but one thing I wanted to highlight for the purposes of the projects is that it allows any round one offshore wind project to seek PSC approval to amend its previous project to increase their OREX. So in summary, what that means in a simplified version is that it allows Maryland to quickly reallocate those OREX held by Ørsted to US Wind. And then when we look in the future to 2026 and beyond, US Wind is establishing a monopile production facility in Sparrows Point, Baltimore. And at this facility, they're going to produce monopile foundations and other steel components needed for these offshore wind projects. And activity at the facility is expected to begin in late 2026. So what that would mean in terms of steel in water is probably around 2027, 2028. So again, this timeline is just to give you an idea of when you will actually see offshore wind farms off the coast of Ocean City, and where we're standing currently with those projects. So to move Maryland towards achieving its 100% clean energy goal by 2035, Governor Moore did sign the Promoting Offshore Wind Energy Resources Act, otherwise known as the Power Act, last year in 2023, which set a new target to achieve 8.5 gigawatts of offshore wind power in the state by 2031. This is an extremely ambitious goal, and there's a lot of challenges and hurdles that we need to overcome to get to this goal. And so the bill that I just mentioned, HB 1296, it does require the Public Service Commission to submit an offshore wind plan to reach this goal to the General Assembly by January 1st, 2025. So just some high key points of the Power Act. This doesn't summarize all the details, but again, just a quick overview. Our original goal for offshore wind was 2 gigawatts, and now it puts it at 8.5 gigawatts. So it does quadruple our original goal. Then we have the law aligns Maryland's goals with federal tax incentives available under the Inflation Reduction Act. And then lastly, the bill requires the Public Service Commission to do a study on the transmission needs for offshore wind so that we can build and maintain a transmission line that makes sense for the environment, it financially makes sense, and it helps us make the right decisions. We don't want multiple developers creating their own transmission lines. We want to make sure that we're working together for what makes the most sense. And it does, the Power Act, ensure that PSC issues a competitive solicitation by January 1st, 2025. And then some more recent activity that occurred a few weeks ago, Governor Wes Moore signed an MOU with the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, BOEM, that basically establishes that the state of Maryland and BOEM agree to stay committed to identifying potential areas for offshore wind leasing. So BOEM is the responsible party for opening up bidding to the lease spaces that are in federal waters. So when I talked about US Wind, getting those OREX and being approved for those projects, it's because they bid for that federal water space from BOEM. Truthfully, Maryland needs a lot more lease space to reach that 8.5 gigawatt goal. So this MOU is encouraging to know that BOEM is willing to help us reach our ambitious goal. If I had to simplify one of the hurdles of the offshore wind industry as a whole along the East Coast is that there just isn't enough real estate on the East Coast. So all the states that align, New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, North Carolina, Virginia, everyone has ambitious offshore wind goals, and there just isn't enough space for all of us to reach our goals. So we do need a lot of help from BOEM to ensure that we find ways to make more space. So now the Good Jobs Challenge. Back in early 2022, the Maryland Department of Labor responded to the Good Jobs Challenge grant opportunity, which was administered by the U.S. Department of Commerce within their Economic Development Administration. Some goals of this grant opportunity include investing in high quality, locally led workforce systems, expanding career opportunities for Americans to ensure they secure good paying jobs, and to produce a skilled workforce that is ready to compete and succeed in a 21st century global economy. When we first got our funding in the fall of 2022, and the original grant end date was at the end of 2025. But good news is we did recently apply for a no-cost extension, and we got approved for the grant to go until the end of 2026. Just some quick facts about this grant opportunity. Maryland Department of Labor was one of 32 grantees awarded. There were over 500 applications, so it was a highly competitive process. There are 15 industries represented in the Good Jobs Challenge, and the one that labor falls into is the energy and resilience industry. Overall, from all 32 initiatives, we do hope to place over 50,000 individuals into good jobs. Within this grant opportunity, the major deliverable is focused on job placement. So it's important to understand what the definition of a good job is for the purposes of the grant. So a good job by EDA definition is a job that exceeds the local prevailing wage for an industry in the regions and includes basic benefits and or is a union job. So with the Good Jobs Challenge grant, the Maryland Department of Labor created the Maryland Works for Win initiative. So here you'll find a visual representation of the sectoral partnership that we created. First and foremost, we ensure that we remain in close contact with all of the employers, as the workforce development programs should be industry-led and ensure that the skills that participants are gaining are going to be needed once they're employed. We have our business alliances, and these organizations serve as our industry experts and really facilitate those peer-to-peer learning exchanges. We have our local workforce development areas. We strategically selected these areas based on the offshore wind activity. So as I mentioned earlier, U.S. Wind's manufacturing facility is going to be located in Sparrows Point, Baltimore. And then also once the offshore wind farms are built, they will be along the coast of Ocean City. So it's important that we focused on Baltimore and the Ocean City Lower Shore area. These local areas help convene our subrecipients in their respective areas. They help us with data collection, and they also fund staff members such as career navigators to assist with recruitment, outreach, job placement, etc. And lastly, on the bottom, you'll see our 15 subrecipients who are training providers. They provide direct training, occupational training to job seekers for skills that align with the offshore wind industry. So these skills include the sectors of manufacturing, the skilled trades, and transportation and logistics. We do break them into two tiers. Our tier 1 training providers focus on entry-level training from an equity lens, where they focus a lot on supportive services and providing free accessible training to job seekers and individuals. These are our nonprofit organizations, community colleges, and even Maryland Labor's own correctional education, which I'll get into detail later on in the slides. Then we have our tier 2 training providers, who are our joint apprenticeship and training committees that provide advanced skills training through a registered apprenticeship program. So if you're familiar with registered apprenticeships, you know that these programs allow participants to earn competitive wages and benefits as they learn through on-the-job training and classroom instruction to be highly skilled workers. In a perfect world, we would love if a participant entered into a tier 1 training program, gained exposure in that sector. They have those wraparound services to really get them on their feet and be successful. And then upon completion, they would apply to a registered apprenticeship program, get accepted, and start gaining those advanced skills, and then later on get into the offshore wind industry. Some quick facts about our grant. We received $22.9 million from the U.S. Department of Commerce. We do have 19 sub-recipients. Our major grant deliverable is ensuring that we place over 3,800 individuals, 3,800 Marylanders into the definition of what a good job placement is. 17.5 million of our total funds are going directly to training organizations. We were able to help 6 Maryland state prisons within their correctional education courses. And again, I'll get into that a little bit later. And then, as I just previously mentioned, the occupational training is in 3 sectors for the offshore wind industry, which is going to be the skilled trades, manufacturing, and transportation and logistics. So now I'll get into some examples of training programs that we are funding through this grant. First being JARC Baltimore. They, through Maryland Works for Wind funds, they have a welding program and a CNC machinist program. JARC provides supportive services prior to a participant entering training, during the training, and even 2 years after training completion. So some specific examples of what that might look like is post-training, they do pay for transportation up to 90 days as long as that individual remains employed. Another example is they may help them with legal matters regarding a previous criminal record. Some of their job placement examples are on the screen: a welder starting at $18 to $25 an hour, or a machinist starting at $23 an hour. JARC has started a partnership with US Wind, which, as mentioned earlier, is one of the major offshore wind developers. And I'll also show a video in about a minute of their partnership with US Wind as well. And then lastly, just highlighting some of their community partnerships that help engage their diverse recruitment into their workforce development program. The Good Jobs Challenge has a big focus on improving women representation in the energy sector and the construction sector. So I just wanted to show a quick example of how JARC Baltimore tries to outreach to women more by making sure that they're represented in their marketing materials. And on the left-hand side is actually their welding instructor, Kay, who you'll see in the video coming up. But it's also amazing to see women in leadership positions as an example to support that outreach to women to join the program. So here's a great video from last summer that the news did a segment on to reflect on JARC's success as well as their connection to the offshore wind industry.
In April, WJZ first told you about US Wind, a company that is breaking ground on manufacturing yard in Sparrows Point.
Project will eventually create about 500 jobs, and many of those jobs will belong to steelworkers.
The Jane Addams Resource Corporation, known as JARC, is one of the community partners US Wind will work with to connect people to jobs.
But JARC is also a program that has literally saved lives. Alex Glaze has the story.
Kay Williams is a welding instructor in Park Heights. She grew up watching her grandfather weld in his garage in Virginia, so you could say that welding is in her blood. As Maryland steelworkers prepare for a big boom in the industry, Kay is recruiting and instructing the next generation of welders, sometimes literally pulling people off the streets of Baltimore.
Watch this.
Kay Williams is a welding instructor.
Watch the goat.
Who sometimes wears multiple helmets.
Sometimes I have to be the parent, the therapist, the teacher, you know, whatever.
Her students can feel her love. It's a love that comes from a deep place and fuels her mission every day. That mission includes revitalizing Baltimore's steel industry while also changing lives.
She's very, loving, caring, passionate. I love Miss Kay.
In July, Governor Westmore toured the old Bethlehem Steel plant in Sparrows Point, a space that is being reimagined and will soon be a manufacturing hub in the offshore wind industry.
This is exciting because this is going to help to set the tone for how Maryland is thinking about moving into the future and doing it in a way that's going to be able to support families with work, wages, and wealth.
The governor's plan is for the towers the wind turbines sit on to be made in Baltimore. This project will lead to about 500 jobs at the Sparrows Point facility. Many of those jobs will belong to steelworkers. US Wind has partnered with JARC, a nonprofit organization that teaches low-income adults skills through free manufacturing job training. Cinnamon Akami is a graduate of JARC's Welding Fast Track program.
I'm glad that they're finally bringing something to us that we get to be a part of.
The program shows students a new life and provides them with skills needed for positions in the metalworking industry. The program has also saved lives.
All I knew was the streets. All I seen was you know, junkies, fiends.
Devontae Murray grew up in East Baltimore.
I ain't had nothing, I didn't know nothing else at all.
He says Jark and his welding instructor, Miss K, saved his life after 2 life-changing experiences. In 2019, right after Devontae's 20th birthday, he was shot in the chest.
4 inches away from death. They told me I was lucky. When they said, man, you're a lucky man. You very lucky, man. That was 4 inches away from your heart, man. You could have, a little inch, you wouldn't have been here.
Devontae also spent time in jail, but says words from his young son changed him.
My son came to visit me when I was in jail. Like, he came to visit me. He was like, Dad, I don't never want to come back here. And then I told him, like, man, I ain't never going back to jail.
Devontae has been working to become a certified welder at Jark since March.
I looked at this opportunity as a second chance of getting it together. This is my resurrection.
A second chance his welding instructor's grandson won't.
So the video definitely speaks for itself, is that highlighting the work that Jark has been doing as a local Baltimore workforce development program that is trying to enter into the clean energy space, and showing a great example of their partnership with US Wind as the activity is going to happen in the Baltimore area. So here's another example of a subrecipient under the Maryland Works for Wind grant, which is a community college in a rural area. So Chesapeake College used grant funds in a unique way to purchase a mobile welding trailer. And so the idea is that it will allow access to disadvantaged communities that may have the interest in welding, but otherwise don't have the transportation needs or other barriers to get to the campus. Through this program, they do provide supportive services through the community college resources, and they hope that individuals will be placed into jobs with Crystal Steel and Chesapeake Shipbuilding who have experience with the offshore wind industry and are going to be employers with the offshore wind industry. Chesapeake College did run into a few bumps in terms of procurement, so the program is set to begin this fall in a few months. And the idea is that the trailer will move around to different counties, kind of park itself there for about 2.5 months, get individuals through the welding training, and then move on to a different area. So it allows that access and flexibility to move to different areas to serve different communities. I did want to provide an example of a tier 2 training provider, which is IBEW Local 24. I think Rico is on this call. Maryland Works for Wind funds help with some of their existing programs in cable splicing, OSHA 30, etc. They use funds for instruction, tools, specialized equipment, and then eventually they'll use funds for global wind organization training, which you'll hear is GWO training. GWO training is a safety training that is required for individuals who work on offshore wind projects on the water. It is a fairly expensive training. It costs over $2,000 a person, and it's required to be recertified every 2 years. So it's incredibly important that you invest in the training at the right time, because certainly we don't want to put people through GWO training today, because the training would then expire at the end of 2026, and we wouldn't have anybody on the water, so it wouldn't make sense. So we do have to make sure that we time that correctly. Again, emphasizing that these programs are advanced skills training. So those who are receiving this are our upper level apprentices, 3rd, 4th, 5th year apprentices, and even in some of these tier 2 programs, the journey workers. Lastly, US Wind has committed to organized labor with the United Steelworkers, the building trades, and IBEW. So just emphasizing why we partnered with these tier 2 training organizations due to their involvement in the industry. And then lastly, I wanted to point out the Maryland Department of Labor's own Office of Correctional Education. The Correctional Education provides all academic, occupational, and transitional programming to incarcerated individuals at Maryland state prisons. We were extremely fortunate to be able to provide funds to correctional education, especially because the Good Jobs Challenge has a big emphasis on placing individuals into good jobs during the grant period, which we could not we could not necessarily do with correctional education because these are individuals are behind the fence. So we wanted to show the federal government how important it was to, maximize that exposure behind the fence to ensure these individuals still have access to gain more skills, adapt to new technology, and learn about a new industry. So again, we are incredibly fortunate to get these funds for correctional education. We used them to purchase a welding simulator and a heavy equipment operator training simulator, and we put them in the 6 prisons that are listed on this slide. Participants in the welding programs and in these programs have expressed how exciting it has been to be able to learn and adapt to new technology with the simulators and learn these skills in a unique way. We also hope to leverage our staff within labor that are our re-entry navigators in the process. Some of these individuals who are receiving this training don't have a release date until 2026, 2027, et cetera. And so long-term, we do hope to connect the re-entry navigators and kind of follow along with these individuals in the process and see where they end up after being released. So where we currently stand with our program status, this is data as of March 31, 2024. To give you a little background, we officially started training under the grant in July 2023. So this is about 9 months of data. We've had over 1,000 individuals enroll into a Maryland Works for When funded program with some examples below. We've had 939 individuals complete training. About 3/4 of these individuals are from Tier 2. However, we do recognize that our Tier 1 success has a lot to do with the wraparound services that are provided below. And then lastly, we've had 831 individuals placed or upskilled into a good paying job with some of those occupation titles below. So I know as I said earlier, EDA has a big focus on female participants. That is one of their major goals, as well as other underrepresented populations. Overall, in our current programming, we do have 6.7% female participants. So there is a lot of room for improvement. And I just wanted to highlight that the Building Trades has a pre-apprenticeship program that they've had 3 cohorts so far, and they did have 32% female participants. So just highlighting that. I do want to say that a lot of the data that is presented on the screen isn't necessarily accurate in measuring the work that we're doing for Maryland Works for When. And why the reason I say that is about 3/4 of the participants are in our Tier 2 training programs. Now, these participants are upper level apprentices. So these 3rd, 4th, 5th year apprentices, they entered this registered apprenticeship program many years ago before the grant started. The work that we are doing in terms of diversifying apprenticeship programs kind of starts at the beginning of the apprenticeship program. So as I mentioned earlier, if someone completed a Tier 1 training program, we would love for them to enter into an apprenticeship program after completion. And this data doesn't necessarily reflect that. So again, we are looking to make a lot of improvements with the grant, but unfortunately, the current participant representation doesn't necessarily reflect the work that we're doing. What would reflect the work that we're doing might have been better to show is what our first year apprentices look like and what that improvement has done over the past year. So again, EDA has a big focus on women, and so we meet with our grantees monthly and come up with strategies to help diversify their recruiting strategies and outreach. For women, a lot of it is including women in marketing materials. We have a Women in Construction Summit. We like to highlight positions that women are usually tend to be interested in, which is highlighting safety, welding, leadership positions. We have social media ads that target key demographics. We emphasize the partnerships with women-based organizations. That is something a lot that we're doing with our Tier 2 providers, their registered apprenticeship programs, is expanding their partnerships with women-based organizations. And then lastly, establishing benefits to attract women. So obviously childcare is a huge barrier with getting women into apprenticeship programs. You know, contractors need workers on the job at 7 a.m. There really is no time to be late or no time to miss a day, or contractors aren't happy and don't want those individuals on the job site. And when it comes to childcare, and if you have a single mother, you know, sometimes things happen. They could wake up with their child sick, and that is a barrier in terms of having accessible childcare in order for the woman to remain on the job. And then formerly incarcerated individuals, I talked about more exposure behind the fence with the funding that we had for correctional education. We talk with our programs about their intentional intake process. What are their eligibility requirements? Why are those requirements? Does that make sense? Why are you doing that with individuals to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to come in? We obviously promote ex-offender friendly programs, and we want to ensure that those programs are partnered with ex-offender friendly employers, because we certainly don't want an individual to enter into a program, gain those skills, and then kind of be in a dead stop of not being able to be employed. Here's just some quick information about our median hourly earnings thus far for the participants in our program. For Tier 1, the median earning is about $23.25 an hour, with some of the job titles examples on the right-hand side. And then for Tier 2, the median earning so far is about $28 an hour. So far within our grant period, some of the best practices that we've learned is that it's really important to stay up to date with offshore wind developers, make sure we're up to date with their timeline and what's happening in the industry. To do so, we have our collaborations with our business alliances. Oceanic Network is really good at hosting events and keeping everyone up to date on legislation and activity that's occurring in the industry. And then the Clean Energy States Alliance does a really good job at hosting convenings of all the East Coast states so that we can learn best practices from each other. In terms of our workforce programs, wraparound services are extremely vital for participants to be successful and set them up for success long-term. We're definitely emphasizing partnerships. When you're working within a new industry, you're consistently learning from each other. And so it's incredibly important to expand your partnerships. And lastly, the intentional outreach to underrepresented populations, which for the purposes of this grant, EDA collects data on women and people of color. Now, some of the challenges that we've been facing so far in the grant period is there have been numerous delays in the offshore wind industry due to issues with inflation, supply chain issues, permitting delays, project cancellations. These things are out of our control, and it's just important that we remain adaptive to what is occurring. Another challenge is obviously diversifying apprenticeship programs. That's something that we are trying to focus on. At the state of Maryland, we do monitor our apprenticeship programs, while some states, the federal government monitors them. And so we do ensure that they are consistently working through ways to diversify the outreach in their programs. And then lastly, just the lack of information for the Maryland offshore wind projects on specific certifications and equipment. Rightfully so, offshore wind developers don't know exact answers yet on what will be involved in the projects. So for example, one of the Maryland Works for Wind grantees, they were going to purchase this very specialized equipment. It cost over $800,000. But after conversations with stakeholders, they learned that due to technological advancements in manufacturing, this original piece of equipment is not necessarily the most efficient, and it's likely that offshore wind developers will move on to something new. So we did make the choice to not invest our federal funds in an equipment piece that we couldn't get a straight answer would be used for the projects. So just an example of, because the projects are not here today, it's likely that things could change over the years just due to advancements. So in conclusion for today, we know that programs that create a a diverse workforce will really help to kick off this industry and allow underrepresented populations access to offshore wind and into a career path in the industry. One thing about offshore wind, which I'm sure you will notice, is that the skills are highly transferable. That's why it makes sense to start the workforce development now, even though the projects aren't here, because they are in sectors that already need more jobs. So for example, the next line item talks about it's going to create jobs across the board in various sectors that currently have an aging workforce. Many of the organizations that I work with, especially within the skilled trades, talk about the large amount of people who are currently retiring. So, not only do we need these workers for offshore wind, but we need them for all of the projects that are occurring in Maryland in general. Offshore wind is going to generate clean, emission-free electricity, and that's why we are here today to talk about the job creation in clean energy. And then lastly, just recognizing that, of course, delays and challenges are going to occur in a new industry. You have to be aware that offshore wind is not just new to Maryland, it's new to the entire country. So there are going to be challenges and delays when you're essentially building an industry from scratch. But thanks to the coordination between states and federal agencies, we are making progress to a clean energy future. Here is my contact information. I am happy for anyone to reach out with any questions or connections. I did include a link to our Maryland Works for Wind website, and then as well as our Maryland Works for Wind policy that our subrecipients use in terms of meeting grant requirements. And now, Cindy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we can open it up for any questions.
Yes, we can. Thank you. This was an excellent, excellent presentation, Chanel. This is so exciting. We are making progress on our offshore wind goals. We are seeing the leadership from the Maryland Department of Labor. We are seeing the leadership from you and thinking very carefully about our just transition priorities and envisioning a world where we really do build out this sector in a way that is equitable, that is inclusive, and really kind of setting an example for other regions as well. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
This is Khalid. I just want to share that I just learned a lot about the wind industry. I mean, this is probably, for you, I'm sure this is your space, but for me, you helped me understand the challenges and the opportunities. So really appreciate the presentation.
Chanel, I did have a question. I was wondering if you could please share if there's any kind of big highlights that folks should be looking out for. Is there kind of like a next step now that there's this new MOU?
So, there is a lot happening behind the scenes in connections with the state agencies, mostly on, I mentioned earlier, the Public Service Commission wants an offshore wind planned by January 1st, 2025. So we are currently actively working on that. In terms of the MOU, I don't have too much to share. I mean, I could get into a little detail of, I talked about there's not enough lease space in the waters. So what are we going to do? And there are different options. The problem is timing. When BOEM puts these spaces out for bidding, they go through an extensive process to ensure those spaces aren't going to have a negative environmental impact. So that process can take over 2 years once they find a space. So I think one of the major things about offshore wind is, unfortunately, it takes a long time to do a project as a whole. And so that's just something to keep in mind, is that we can't really rush a lot of things in the process, but we are actively just looking for different ways. So one thing to note is that with offshore wind, they're looking at floating wind turbines. And what that would allow is for us to put offshore wind farms into federal waters that are way off the coast, because currently we can't put wind turbines on the ground way off the coast. But if we start doing more research and investments into floating turbines, that could be a way that we expand our lease space. But unfortunately, that's very early talks, and that would take a long time. So that's nothing that's going to be in the near future. I do have to say, in terms of Maryland Works for Wind and our initiative, we do open up a lot of our in-person convenings to any organizations to come. You don't have to be a Maryland Works for Wind subrecipient. So I do encourage you to reach out to me if you want to get involved with the initiative, or just honestly learn about offshore wind more. Feel free to reach out and I can get you plugged in to our listserv for any of our in-person convenings.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And a reminder to everyone, all the meeting materials will always be posted on our website. These presentations will be available following this meeting. So you can always go check out the Maryland Works for Wind website. Alrighty, so we are going to be moving on to the next portion of the conversation, which is the open discussion portion. So I'm going to be presenting my slide. All right, can you see? So the very first thing that I wanted to just spend a few minutes on is an item on the agenda that I labeled as a fun item, which is this. I am wondering if anyone has any ideas, and this is really, this is open for anyone, so members and participants can chime in if they have any ideas. We are talking about very complicated topics. We're talking about programs, we're talking about meeting our equity, climate, energy goals across the space, and I thought it would be fun to just have a perhaps just kind of a conversation, something fun, a field trip perhaps. Does anyone have any ideas or immediate reactions?
Are you suggesting like a site visit to an existing project, or is this more of a social engagement?
Yes, it would be themed. It would have to be relating to supporting our climate goals. So a site visit, for example, to an exemplary energy efficient space would be a great thing to do. We did hear that idea during our first meeting, so just seeing if anyone has any specific ideas at this time. If there's no specific ideas, we can move on. Feel free to email us if you do come up with any ideas for field trips, because that is part of what we can do as a working group, is we can determine some of our next steps. But really, I did want to kind of just go back into our guiding principles after having heard from Maryland Department of Labor. We have heard that the future of wind will be bringing over 50,000 jobs. We have heard that we care about job creation across industries. And I am wondering if everyone could turn on their cameras and just have an open discussion about some of the priorities that you are seeing from your side of things. And if anyone other than Khalid could participate, I'm trying to be, more inclusive here, that would be lovely.
On behalf of Civic Works, I can just say we certainly support the guiding principles and the synopsis on the other slides of responses from members. We are in alignment with all of that as well. Also really appreciated the presentation by Chanel. And like Khalid said, found that, it was educational for me to learn a little bit more about offshore wind. And yeah, definitely also supportive of the idea of a site visit for the group. Think that would be a cool opportunity. Don't have any immediate ideas of, what would be the best option for that, but supportive of that idea.
Khalid, I didn't mean to cut you off. Please feel free to chime in.
No, I've got a project we're working on. It's in pre-development stages. It's a affordable housing project, seniors, disabled individuals in Prince George's County. They've got a number of existing systems, very good project narrative for building decarbonization. They've got boilers, cooling tower that was damaged, chillers. They're currently looking at doing some renovations. They've got some state and local funding, but there's a huge gap to fill in terms of getting these projects completed. They've got there's a backup generator that's aging, that's not reliable, so they're considering doing some solar to kind of augment that. They got to replace the roof. So, I mean, it would be like a site visit in terms of looking at existing building conditions before any of the improvements are done. So if you all are interested in that, I can work with the on-site folks to see if we can get something going.
Do any of the members have any reactions to that suggestion? Rico gives a thumbs up. Elisa. Nice. Okay, we'll add it to the list, Khalid. Thank you. I'll reach out to get a little bit more details. Daniel?
So in April, I was invited to serve as the MC for Prince George's County's Climate Action Leadership Summit, which was their first convening under the school. Sorry, let me restate that. It was the Prince George's County Public Schools Climate Action Leadership Summit, and it was their first convening under the school system's new climate action plan, which was adopted by the school board. And so a couple of things. One is it was hosted at the Akkeek Foundation, which has a really interesting facility. So if you're looking for kind of a place to get in touch with where climate change is affecting and seeing how they're responding, great story and facility there. And they'll give you tours and such as well. I think the PG County school system is a very interesting intersection here for this group as well. And there's a natural relationship. Dorothy Morrison, who used to be at MDOT, is their recently minted director of sustainability. And the chief operating officer of the school system is championing their efforts. So I think there's a really interesting opportunity here to connect the dots between what this work group is doing and what PG County school system is doing. And I'd be happy to help facilitate that. I have a meeting with them in about soon, very short, like in the next few minutes. So
Best of luck in the meeting, Daniel. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Always good to hear about our sustainable school efforts here in Maryland. The governor actually came to our headquarters on Earth Day to sign a new executive order on outdoor learning partnership. It is a combination of different agencies, and it's actually promoting exactly what you're saying, Daniel, sustainable school spaces for our students to have healthier environments, but also just start engaging with the environment and climate spaces that they need to engage in so that we can build the workforce of tomorrow. Thank you.
Yep.
Rico?
So that I actually have to hop off for that, but thanks for inviting me.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just thinking I can't speak for Sean Stracer or Gerald Jackson, but there are, they have apprenticeship programs in Southern Maryland, in Baltimore County, and then ours is in Baltimore City. So we can maybe do a meeting at a registered apprenticeship program and then take a tour of the facility afterwards during whatever the case may be. And I can help facilitate that on our end. I'm sure, like I said, I can't speak for Gerald or Sean, but I'm sure they would be able to do something similar at a mechanical training center as well.
That would be amazing, Rico. I will definitely be reaching out to learn more details. I actually did get the chance to get a tour of a union facility earlier this year, led by Greg from, I'm sorry, I forget the acronym.
Was it the building trades?
Yes,
Or,
yes.
okay.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was very cool to learn about how they're thinking about heat pumps. They're really thinking about comprehensive, looking ahead courses for their students. Great. Is there anyone else? Right. So I do think we are going to be getting, I did want to just kind of give a broad overview of where we are regarding the study piece. So I did mention earlier that within the next 2 months, really, we'll be ramping things up. We'll be collecting your feedback on potential recommendations. And then as a group, we will be voting on the August meeting. Next meeting, I'm hoping we will begin the study deliverable. As a reminder, 2 deliverables. One is the recommendations piece. The other is the study to the General Assembly and the governor, meeting the letter of the law. And so the study piece is being led by the DOE, National Renewable Energy Lab. We actually do have the team lead joining us today, but we are going to be beginning that research introduction during our next meeting. So stay tuned for that piece because we are going to be doing a deep dive on a few communities and how they can be contributing to our just transition principles and what we are trying to create here. So that's the preview for the next few months. Next month, study, kind of introduction and kind of beginning a conversation regarding our draft recommendations. And on August, we vote. And then by September, around September, that will be where the Climate Change Commission will be having their $1 billion per year voting session. And that's when we'll have known if our recommendations have made it into the, they do have to be, as a reminder, they do have to be voted by the Climate Change Commission itself, and we'll know if it makes it for the final Climate Change Commission recommendations and report that is due every year to the Governor and General Assembly. So if there is nothing else, or if no one has any other comments or questions, I am going to be closing the discussion and opening it up for public comments. If someone has a public comment to make, please put it in the chat. Seeing no public comments, I will be adjourning this meeting, and I am looking forward to continuing the conversation in the weeks and months to come. Thank you so much, everyone. Feel free always to shoot me resources if you want me to share. Thank you for all of you who have already done that.
Thanks, Cindy. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Cindy. Thank you, Chanel. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Take care.